writer for Entertainment Weekly, Samantha Highfill.
What'd you guys think? Who did it? All right, let's bring out, we've got some cast, some creators to talk about this 15 minutes and also 2 seasons of great work. We're gonna start with executive producer Julie Plec. She plays Hope, Danielle Rose Russell. He plays Landon, Arya Shagasemi. She plays Lizzie, Jenny Boyd. He plays MG, Quincy Faust. She plays Josie and Dark Josie, Kaylee Bryant. He plays Caleb, Chris Lee. He plays Raph, Peyton Alex Smith. And last but not least, executive producer Brett Matthews. Are we out of a chair? I can stand.
You have to stand.
Here, I can stand. Brett, come sit.
You will stand and
Yes.
you will like it.
What's the bigger mystery? Who shot Vardamus or where is this chair? All right. Perfect. And then let's make Brett talk because he just got to sit down. Well, I actually do want to start with Brett because I know that you are the man with the brilliant idea. So talk to me a little bit about where the film noir episode came from, how it all started.
It's just a genre I love. I went to school at Wesleyan, and there's an amazing woman who founded that film program, decades ago and runs it to this day, and she teaches classes by genre, and so film noir was always my favorite class there, so Janine Basinger's a lot of that. But we broke this story, and we just knew the box was going to send people to some genre, and so we talked about a lot of options, and when the calendar was just sort of late and like, oh, we got to write this in a week, it was like... Film noir is very easy, and we also thought it was a great opportunity to sort of see our cast as different people, and also our hair and makeup and wardrobe department to really let those guys shine. So it's kind of how it came about.
Well, that's actually, so how long does it typically take to write an episode?
I don't know if there's a typical, a week is like an extravagant amount of time, it feels like.
Okay.
But we like to give people a week in a perfect world.
We usually try to give, obviously, in a perfect world, 2 to 3 weeks is a nice amount of time to write an episode of television. But that just doesn't ever happen that way. So usually we like to try to give people 2 full weekends and the week in between so that they have a good 10-day window. We've written episodes in 48 hours in our lifetime. Not on this show, but in our lifetime, for sure. I think the Vampire Diaries season finale of season 4 was that Graduation.
Yes.
Yeah, I think. Yes, thank you. I think Dreezy and I wrote that in 36 hours. It was bananas.
You wrote however long it takes, and it's amazing. Sorry, that's an Inside Vampire Diaries woman. But I know for the actors, not all of you got to be in this episode, obviously. But for those of you who were, I know you talked about research, and I'm curious, what is the research process for an episode like this? Is it just watching old movies? Did you get actual homework?
Yeah, we did. We got sent a few links. I got kind of into it. I also watched The Big Sleep with Bogart and Bacall, which didn't make much sense to me, but was awesome and beautiful. But yeah, it was a really exciting opportunity for sure.
Yeah, you had to nail that scream.
Oh, thank you.
It was pretty
good.
good.
The bad actress scream.
Okay, well, I want to talk also about something you guys have introduced this season, which is Dark Josie, obviously, as I mentioned. I'll start with the writers and go to Kaylee of just of all the characters to kind of get to have this transformation, what was it kind of about Josie that made you guys want to explore a darker side?
I think it makes sense. It's sort of this repressed side of her personality. She's obviously a very powerful witch, but Josie Saltzman in her normal days is always sort of putting others ahead of herself, so it just sort of makes sense that there would be this side of her personality that would be willing to lash out
Yeah, there's certain things when you start a character from scratch where you just know a road that you're eventually going to take them down, and it's really just a matter of when you put them on that road. But Josie, who was created as a yin to Lizzie's yang, also comes from that same family of the Gemini, the Gemini. I'm trying to think of a politically correct word, but mentally unstable people. Yeah. And so it really was. We always knew that Josie would take a walk down a dark path at some point. So this season lent itself to that. Just as Lizzie's pulling herself together and really trying to get a grip on her own stability, she has to be confronted with her sister, exploring the darker side of herself.
Yeah. And Kaylee, what's that been like for you? Was there anywhere you went for inspiration for such a dark character?
Not really. I had been kind of creating Josie's thought process since before we started filming episode 1. So I knew that she had a lot of pent-up anger and a lot of resentment towards her father and her family in general and her friends. So I feel like it was kind of therapeutic and a nice release every time I got to play Dark Josie.
Well, between this season alone, there's the film noir world, there's the video game world, which was an episode I loved. There's so many. For you as a cast, what are the filming experiences in terms of episodes that stand out to you? If you got to refilm an episode purely for the experience of making it, which one would you go back to?
Anytime we're shooting inside.
Yes. Yes.
It was really fun doing the talent show because it felt like we were shooting a music video. And if we weren't on stage performing, we were in the audience watching, Lizzie and Josie up there, Ralph up there, getting to perform their art. And it was kind of like, what it would be like on a music video set. You're kind of there all day for this, maybe 2-minute sequence. And just a lot of magic is happening. Then you see the final product, and it's quite beautiful.
How much do the actors get to know in terms of Ralph has a big mystery surrounding him right now? How much do you get to know?
I know as much as you guys. No, it depends. Sometimes it's fun knowing, not knowing, because then it surprises you, and sometimes that helps me as an actor. And Julie and Brett are good with finding that fine line of knowing what that is for me. So if I need to know something, sometimes it helps to know in advance, and then if not, it's a good surprise.
Yeah. I also, this show, Landon flew recently, which I always love. Whenever I'm watching scenes like that, I'm watching Hope, and I'm I wonder what the direction is for what Danielle is supposed to be like. This is a show where you guys are constantly looking at crazy things, reacting to crazy situations. What is the weirdest piece of direction you feel you've gotten?
Season 1, episode 2. They put this little probably piece of paper size green screen thing 20 feet in the air, and they were all right, have fun, that's a dragon.
We act to pieces of tape a lot, X's on some sort of screen or something, and it's just okay, I'm just gonna have this really emotional moment to a green X.
Actually, I think the best one was episode 4, where we had Jeremy, one of our stuntmen, in an actual blue unitard, hanging above Peyton and I. And it was all right, you're terrified, there's a spider. And we were no, there's just a man in a unitard.
More terrifying than the spider. Ultimately, Jeremy in a giant spandex sock, essentially.
Well, I do want to touch on, a lot of people here at SCAD want to go into the industry. So for the writers, I would love to know kind of your, how you first got into this industry. And then for the actors, I would actually love to hear, your audition story for Legacies.
Memories. Okay, writers first. I did not know I wanted to be a writer. In fact, I was certain I couldn't be a writer because I was definitely aware that I was not a good writer. And then just eventually I found my way back to what I realized way too late I had always been. I had taken a playwriting class in college and bombed out so hard that I thought, all right, I'm moving to California. I want to work in the business. I definitely know I can't write. So at least that takes something off my list. And then I just started how most people start, you get your first assistant job out of, whatever job newsletters floating around, or like for me, it was actually the Hollywood Reporter, which was a want ad, which is not how you get jobs anymore. And then I just worked my way up and started working with filmmakers. And as I'm working with them, then suddenly I'm doing a lot of writing to help them. And then the writing that I'm writing is getting shot and ending up as dialogue in like an episode of Dawson's Creek. And then finally, and I'm not kidding, 15 years later, I said, well, maybe this is something I could do. So don't let failure in college set you back, because it takes a long time to recover from that.
I went to school to be a cinematographer, so that didn't work out, unfortunately. But I moved to LA wanting to be that. Did a little bit of work, got a job as a PA getting people coffee. Show got canceled 3 episodes later. Led to a PA job on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, where I was lucky enough to fall in with Joss Whedon. And people were always asking, do you write? And I was like, yeah, I write. It's not really what I necessarily want to do. But I wrote a script that he responded to really well. And so it really was, having somebody whose work you really respect, who believed in me, and he was like, you should probably be a writer. And, that's really what's driven me forward. So, didn't know anybody in the town. You find your people. You don't have to know people to make it. You just have to have a real drive and determination, and hopefully be talented, though people make it with 2 out of the 3. So between Joss and Julie Plec, that's really my story. So very lucky. Right time, right place, but you got to have something to hand people when they ask.
Just making sure we're awake.
Danielle got to audition first because she was in season 5 of the original. So she lapped everybody by about a full year.
Yeah, I actually auditioned out of Warner Brothers in New York, and I had kind of been going through a lull in my career. I felt like I had done features and I had done some TV. But then I kind of just was like, okay, I'm 17, the whole thing about working until you're 18. I was like, I don't really expect anything to come my way. And so I was planning on going to school and, working wherever I could find a job. And I was just auditioning still. And I went into Warner Brothers and I read for this character. And I was looking at the breakdown of it. And it was Klaus Michelson's daughter, Hope. And I was like, oh, really? I was like, I had watched 4 seasons of The Vampire Diaries when it first came out. And I remember my first ever movie was with Sebastian Roche. He played my father in that movie. And so I remember when we did that in 2012, he was like, yeah, I'm doing this show called The Originals. And then it all kind of clicked for me. So I read a couple times. I think I came in 3 times, and I Skyped with you, and I don't even know who else. I was so nervous. I was just like, okay, I'm just gonna do this thing. And and then I was the negotiation thing, and I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna do it. Am I gonna do this or not? Whatever. And 2 days later, I moved out to Atlanta, and I've been here for 3 years. So, yeah.
Aria?
I auditioned for The Originals too, and it kind of started as it was just another audition that came across the table, and I was like, okay, cool, gotta work on this, work at a bar, work on this, go do the audition, and then suddenly my manager called me and said, hey, they want your passport info, and I was like, and then all of a sudden, I think he called me at 4 p.m. one day, and he said, hey, they're flying you out to Georgia. I said, when? He said, 6 p.m. I said, cool, what day? And then I screen tested, and that was my first ever screen test, so I didn't realize that when you have a screen test and there's a whole set of people and they have ADs and cameras working and a set and all this stuff, that's not normal.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that. So when I walked in, I was like, oh, this is very cool. And everyone's like, we get a blue screen and a casting director doesn't want to be there. So it was
because we knew that Landon, we were going to introduce him in the originals, and that in success he would be the love interest, the sort of romantic leading man of the spinoff. But he didn't really know that, so he thinks he's just coming in for a guest star, and then all this madness is happening.
I had fittings and hair and makeup and everything, and I was like, wow, okay, it was cool.
Wait, did the 2 of you do a chemistry read?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it exists. We filmed it.
We did an 8-hour day of another actor and him just doing 2 scenes with on our set. We were filming the scene. That's never happened in a chemistry read ever in my life, and I'm waiting for the day it does because that's not fair.
I auditioned in LA, and I kind of went into it very much thinking, I'm probably not going to get this. But I had a lot of fun in the first round, and Julie was there, and then I got a call back, and I was incredibly sick. I had like this crazy fever, and I felt like I couldn't even see straight. But I really wanted to go, and my reps were like, "You can't go. They'll hate you. Don't go." So I was really disappointed. But Kaylee was at that callback, and she told me about it, and then I was very grateful in hindsight that I wasn't there because it sounded really awful. It was basically like The Bachelor for actors. Like, it was probably my worst nightmare. But then they still called me back again, and I got to do a screen test at Warner Brothers, and met Kaylee that day, and it all went great. And yeah, we were actually really worried because Julie came out at the end, and she was like, I just want to tell you guys, you are so talented. And we were both like,
we'll leave. Okay,
we didn't get it. Oh my God. That's what they say. Like, everybody always comes out and is like, no matter what happens, I just want you to know you did such a good job. And we were both just like, no.
I loved it though because we did this like chemistry pairing in the audition before we took everybody to the studio for approvals, and the two girls, I knew that I wanted them both, but they didn't know that. And I said, what do you guys know about the show? Like, you know, do you know, like, you're playing twins, so do you know what that means? And I think it was Kaylee. She goes, we're Caroline's daughters, aren't we? And I was like, yes, you are. And they were so excited.
So yeah, that was my experience.
It's so weird, like, hearing you guys' stories because it made mine, like, flood back. I actually auditioned to be on the originals as well. I auditioned to be Landon at first. Yeah. And, you know, that was wild. Obviously, I didn't know what I was getting into, and I was, like, just, like, watching the show before the audition, and so, like, I'm, like, just then getting, like, freshed up on what this world was, and I was like, oh, okay, going into it. And then I looked at, like, I looked at Klaus, and I looked at Elijah, and I was like, and this guy is supposed to be, supposed to stand up. You know what? I'm going to go in. I'm going to give her my best, and what happens, happens. And then I didn't get it, and I was like, okay, like, it hurts, because, like, I see how, like, dope the fandom is, and womp womp. And then I get a call, and there's another audition. And I'm like, okay, is this for, like, the same guy, or what's going on? And then, you know, went through that whole process. And what is crazy is, I think what the first two, I had to cancel the first callback, and then I came in, and then I was sick. The second one, I think, is what it was. Yeah, because I was in the room, and I had, like, guys, I tried out this new workout thing, and I didn't eat, and so, like, my body was eating itself. It's a weird thing. But, like, I started shaking in the room, and I was like, I'm not scared, and then I'm, like, looking to the people next to me, like, I'm not scared, okay? Leave me alone. You know, but came back the third time by the grace of Julie Plec.
By the way, like, I've never told you this, but the person that he was testing against was somebody that I have known since he was 8 years old. This stepson of a friend of mine who I watched grow up, and he became an actor. And he reached out and he said, I'd really love to audition anytime. And so I had him go on tape for something a couple years ago. And then finally there was a part that he was right for. So I brought him in, kind of expecting it to be a little bit of a favor. But he was amazing, and I was so happy for him. And then Quincy comes in. I'm like, okay, you know. But the story has a really happy ending, because that kid, after that, got a series regular role on The Society. He's Jacques Coleman on The Society, and he's great, and that's a great part for him. So it all worked out. Like, everybody got the right job.
And my ego is out the roof.
Yeah,
right now.
it should be.
It should be. Thank you.
Kaylee?
Yeah, I got the audition through my agent, like all of us did in LA. And it was one of those things where, as an actor, you kind of get these sides, and it was pilot season, and it was one of, like, the first ones in a while that actually, like, fit, like, your mouth, if that makes any sense. Like, it feels right. So I went in, met Julie Plec, and, like, I watched, like, so much behind the scenes stuff with the Vampire Diaries that, like, I knew what you looked like. And so, like, I went into the audition room and I was like, oh, this is real. Okay, here we go. And then I had the Bachelor callback, which was basically that like they brought in like 20 girls to like mix and match for chemistry reading. Jenny was not there, so I basically read with like 15 girls is what it felt like. It might have not been that dramatic, and they like did it like theater. Like it was like one of those things where it was like, all right, if I call your name, you can go home. It doesn't mean anything, but you can go home. And it was just like everybody was like waiting there, like, oh my god. And it got down to like it just dwindled down until it was just me and another person, and then I met Jenny Boyd in the Warner Brothers test. So yeah.
Sorry, other person.
Yes. I think Brett can probably talk better than I can about my process. I was living in Chicago and I was doing this play and I left it and moved to LA.
You little humble not
That's
brag.
so lame. This play.
He was in Hamilton.
Yeah, it was Hamilton. Yeah. And I was
Never heard of it.
I was leaving to go to LA. I'd done a couple like guest star TV things, so I was like, oh, I think I want to do some TV. And I had met Brett prior because we did he put me on an episode of Scream. He was doing MTV Scream, and we met and we just chopped it up and had a cool relationship. He was like, yeah, man, if I ever got anything that comes across the table, I'll call you. It's like, cool. So I moved to LA, and that week he called. He said, hey, man, so I think I'm working on this show. It's Vampire Diaries stuff. I was like, oh yeah, I watched it with my girlfriend a couple times. I think and he was like, yeah, so like I think I want you to come to LA. I think I want you to meet Julie Plec. I was like, oh, okay, cool. I just moved to LA. That's cool. So I met Julie in her office, and that was so cool because I was just like, I didn't really know anything about the process of TV and auditioning, so I didn't know that it wasn't always like this. I was like, hey, Julie, we're sitting, we're talking, and hey, Brett, okay, cool. And then I go home, and I'm just kind of like, all right, we'll see what happens. And he calls me again. He's like, yeah, like, do you feel more like a vampire or werewolf? And I was like, I don't know. I think they're both really cool. Like, it's like, well, I got this character for you. I don't know. I can't promise you anything. Don't know how long it's gonna last, but I think you'd be great for it. I go in and audition for it, and then I get a call back, and I go. And like a couple days later, I was going to Atlanta, and I met everybody else. They thought I was a stuntman. It was hilarious. They did not know that I was. You remember that? We were preparing for the football scene. And there were a lot of stunt people, and I was just kind of sitting there and not nearly knowing where to go. And like, Chris, Caleb, I was like, that's me. And like, oh, you. That's cool. You know what I mean? And,
before I knew he was an actor on the show, we had already like chopped it up so much. It was just like talking a bunch of cash and like having a good time. And it was like, oh, we're going to be like brothers on the show.
Exactly. Yeah.
Fantastic.
It's been cool since then. Yeah, that was the audition story. And Caleb is Caleb.
Also, we created the part with you in mind, which of course you don't tell you when you're auditioning for it because that's terrible. Because if we don't give it to you, it's like really embarrassing.
That would be awful. We made this for you, but psych.
But we met him. We were all like, he charmed the pants off all of us, and so the writers were like, let's write a part for this guy, and we did.
Thanks, writers. Thank you.
Yeah, I auditioned and I got it. Great story. No, I was on another show at the time, and I went in and like tested for this other CW show, and they were like, "Oh, well, we're going this week, and your other show hasn't released you yet." And I was like, "So what does this mean?" They were like, "You're not getting it." Cool. And then I got the audition from Julie and Brett and them about this one. I was like, well, I don't want to go in again. I'm not going to get it or whatever. But I was just feeling emotional that day, and the scene was emotional, so I just took my sensitive self in. and then I did the audition, and I forgot who said it. It might have been Julie. They were like, "Yeah, you're really deep." And I was like, "I'm just going through some things." And so I left.
So many tears in that audition, like so many tears.
Hey,
the casting director's like, the person reading with you was so uncomfortable in that scene. It was great.
He's going for it.
But he was the last one. We were shooting like Thursday, and we cast him on Wednesday.
But no, this was the one because when I was in LA, it was like still like 5 months out, and so then I did that, and I went home, and then my manager was like, "Who was in the room? Did you see Brett or Julie?" And I was like, "I don't know." and then, and so then they were like, okay, cool. Like 2 weeks went by. I was like, oh, well, that's dead. And so I just been auditioning and stuff. And then like I get this random call back, and I was like, oh, it's still here, I guess. Okay. And they were like, but don't come in. They were like, tape it. I'm here, but cool, whatever. I'll tape it. And so then I taped it. 5 months later, didn't hear anything. I'm in New York. My other show, we didn't come back, and I was like, dang, I could have did. Anyways, yeah, so I'm out there in New York just auditioning, and then randomly they get a call, and it was for this, and I was like, Jesus Christ. All right, I'm gonna do it again. But then I was going through some things again. It's a tough year. And then
I think Julie said, do you remember that guy who cried all the time? And we were like, and this is also on the heels of like a chemistry read with Dan that poor Danielle had to fly to LA for. And I think you were out doing the first episode at this point already. Because like Julie was out
in Atlanta.
and like she called me after, how'd it go? And that's the first day I met Danielle. And I was like, we have an amazing number one, but we're gonna get canceled if it comes down to this part. Because we had that first chemistry read and we couldn't find Raph. Like it took Raph forever. And that's when we doubled back to Peyton, and that last read was the one, less tears.
No, there was
still tears. But
no, it was. I went in, but then like I got like extra size like the day of, and I went in, I just didn't know him, and so I'm in the audition, and then she was like, well, they want you to like just say the actual words on the page, and I was like, no, I don't know it, and so for the final one, like I just read from the paper. I got frustrated, and I was like, and then like my notes came back, and they were like, it just seemed like he was reading from the paper, and I was like, it was. And so they called, and then I was on the phone with my manager. I was like, bro, yeah, it's dead, man. Like I'm just sitting outside of Warner Brothers in New York, and I'm just like, cars passing by. You just see failure. And then they called me back the next day, and I was, well, okay. And then I went in and flew in the next day, and they had already started shooting. And then my first scene was with like Danielle, and I was turning into a werewolf, and I was. Okay, all right. And so there was this one take where I was just like turned into a werewolf on the ground. I was screaming. I didn't know what to do, breaking bones. And then Danielle was just like looking at me, and she was like, "The camera's not on you." And that's how I got. So cool, great first day.
Well, I don't know how we're gonna top that moment. I want to get to you all's questions in a minute, but I will ask one last thing, which is just filming here in Atlanta. I feel like you're in like a bit of a bubble. Like you're making, especially with like season 1, you're making the 3rd series in like a world. You don't know if it's like if people are gonna be over it, if it's gonna catch on. When did you all finally realize like the show was a hit?
Wait, what? Sorry.
When did you realize the show was a hit?
Me?
I'll say, I realized the show was a hit when I was walking through Publix, and I got stopped by like an 8-year-old kid who said, "MG," and starts crying to his sister and to his parents, and they're like, "Oh, will you take a picture?" "Oh, sure." And I'm just like, "Oh, wow, like this is happening, and it's scary." And then in the same Publix, this 36-year-old African-American dude was like, "MG?" And I was like, what?
He started crying to his sister and his parents and his mom.
And it was like, oh, my girlfriend watches the show, and can I get a picture with you? And I'm like, yeah, bro, come on. So after I figured out it was that widespread, I was like, okay, we're here.
I'll tell you when I knew it was a hit. I think episode 8 had aired at this point, and I went to Jamaica because I had like 9 off or something like that. And I was in Jamaica, yes, and I was relaxing. I was in Jamaica, and no, this is New Year's. That's what it is. It's New Year's, so everybody's off. So it's New Year's, and I'm really relaxing. And there's like a New Year's Day party. And we go to it, and there's like a bunch of photographers there. It's just like a big thing. It costs money to get in. It was really fun. And I walk up, and there are these like 9 little girls, and they're like handing out like I think it was like Krispy Kreme or KFC. It was KFC. Handing out KFC, and Jamaica KFC is really good. So they're handing out KFC, and then one little girl looks at me and she says, "Oh!" and she runs up. And she like all the girls run up to me like, "Are you Caleb?" And I was like, "How the hell did she?" Yeah. I said, "Yeah." She said, "Why you so evil in a show?" I could not make it up. That's when I know. I said, "I'm in Jamaica." How do they know? How do they know? That's when I knew it was a hit. We were going and going and going.
I mean, you expect that kind of thing at Publix. We're huge in Publix.
Like a little girl handing out KFC in Jamaica. It's just,
That's amazing. All right, who in the audience has a question? Raise your hand if anyone wants to ask anything, except unless you're in this light, in which case I can't see you. Oh yeah, over there.
Hey guys, my name's Catherine Jameson. I am a BFA student here in television and film. To our showrunners, what are some of the largest challenges you have overcome in your years of showrunning?
Just the fact that we're alive is means so much. Showrunning is a soul-crushing job. It has all the rewards in the world, and being able to be the boss of your own storytelling obviously is an incredible privilege, and so it is worth it, but like barely, because it is just the challenges of showrunning never stop. Because just when you get through a rewrite of an episode that really needed that rewrite, and you're like, whoo, okay, I can put that up. You get a cut that comes in from another episode that needs work. And every time you see something that's not working, you just believe that it's because you are terrible. You believe you are terrible, and then you have a brief moment where you decide, no, it's not me, it's everybody else that's terrible. And how dare they mess up my genius? And then what you really get to is like, oh no, the music's wrong. Or the cutting pattern is just off rhythm a little bit. And you get into like diagnostics, or the script is good because the story works, but the dialogue doesn't. And that's the hard part, because you're battling ego and insecurity and like this endless pressure of time and deadlines and wanting to please the audience and wanting to please, be the kind of storyteller that can be proud of what they're putting out. And it just goes again and again and again and again from like June until April. And then you deliver your final episode in May, and then 2 weeks later you start your writers all over again, and it just never stops. And so the biggest problem with showrunning is just having, by the way, it's awesome. But it's that you have to wear a producer hat, you have to wear a managerial hat, which is really hard for creative people. You have to always have a creative hat, which is hard just in general, because whenever I have my creative hat on, I am a like self-loathing, insecure, terrible person. My producer hat, I'm like, hey, what's up? But you're just constantly wearing all the hats at the same time, and it's hard.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything Julie said, it's like being in a car crash that lasts 10 months. It's basically what it is. And it is the greatest job in the world. And I know those two things seem like they're in opposition, but they're not. It's more work than any one human being can do. And that's just the reality. It's like, it's your entire life. So you have to have an understanding partner. You have to realize that you're gonna go to sleep. You're gonna go home at 9 o'clock, and you're not gonna be able to think about anything but the show. And then you're gonna go to sleep, and you're gonna dream about it. And you're gonna wake up, and hopefully your brain sorted out the problems. And there's just always something else to do. And so we're very lucky. We work with amazing, talented people, and we have a great family of crew members on the crew side. So we've built up the people who make it sane. And Julie's the best partner a person could ever run a show with. But watch that documentary, Showrunners. It's fascinating because they just shrink. Like, they're all people who are grinding their teeth as they're giving interviews and grabbing on a table, and it's kind of that. But it's also the greatest thing in the world. It's a very singular job.
Anybody else have a question? Sure, we'll bring the mic.
Hey guys, thank you for coming out. My name's Chris. I'm a film and television major. Bouncing off that showrunner's question, is there a track for people who really see themselves as a showrunner, how to get there? I mean, are you working your way up, or are you just coming up with that good idea that you get scooped up?
They'll never let you run a show, even if it's your own show, if you haven't come up through the system in some way. The paths are very different. The traditional path is you start as a staff writer, and 10 years later, you've worked your way up to being a showrunner. You go up the actual union ladder of titles: staff writer, story editor, co-producer, producer, co-executive producer, etc. And then you can earn your way to that title over time and through experience. I was a producer. As we've discussed, I wasn't a writer for the first 15 years, and so I was a producer. So by the time I started writing, I was already producing the television show that I got to then start writing. So I skipped all those steps and got my experience from the producing side. Every now and then, like the right piece of material, the right personality, they'll partner you with the showrunner. And if you learn on the ground really, really well, then you can earn the title of showrunner quickly. But it is a job that, like, it's the 10,000 hours thing, right? The Malcolm Gladwell. Like, after 10,000 hours of writing and producing television, you will know how to show run television, but it's very difficult to understand what it is and how to do it if you haven't just been in the shit of it for quite a long time.
Yeah, I'd say, it's unless you're proximate to a showrunner, it's hard to be like, oh, this is what I should do. Like, you might want to be a creator, and that's a very valid path now, and they'll put you with a more experienced person. And so there's no better way or worse way, but the only way to do it is actually participate in making television and see what that job is, because I know people that go both ways. People who are like, I never thought I would do that job, or people are like, I always thought I wanted to do it, and seeing what that life is actually like, no. So it's the best thing you can do is get in the business and be close to it. And like Julie said, it's like you're spending millions of dollars every week, so it's not like they're just going to turn those reins over. But you can create, or you can come up through the system, and either way works.
Anybody else have a question? Sure, down here in front. Should bring your mic.
Actually, my mom has the question, but I just want to say happy belated birthday to Jenny, because her birthday was 2 days ago.
Chris, I took my daughter to see Hamilton this past summer up in New York, and I just have a question. What is it like going from being on stage and performing like that to working in television? I mean, I'm sure all of you probably have worked in different genres, TV, different things. What is it like going back and forth between those different genres?
Yeah, it's fun. It's a lot. They're two completely different styles, if you ask me. I remember the first time I ever did anything on TV, the biggest note that I got was the director came up to me and was like, hey, man, you're doing, like, a really, really good job. But, like, why are you screaming? Like, you're so loud. You have a mic on. It was like, hey, what's up, friend? How you doing? This is my car. Because then, like, because in TV you can, like, it's a little more, the realism is very specific. But it's fun because there's nothing in the world like a live audience, right? Nothing like performing an entire story, knowing the beginning and the end, and getting to set all of that up, over like a 2 to 3 hour period, and then presenting that brand new every night. Like, that's because you get to, you really get room to play there. There's also nothing like a story that, like, potentially never ends, right? Like, your character could literally go and do anything, and they get older as you get older, and they learn as you learn, and so they're very different, but it's a lot of fun. I love going back and forth and back and forth. Yeah.
All right, I think we have time for one last. Sure, let's go up here in the back. The mic is coming, I think, yeah. Or you can shout it. I mean, we can hear you.
How do you memorize? I mean,
I think
This process is really interesting.
I think
Y'all memorize?
everybody's different. Me developing my did you say? Do you guys memorize? Everybody's process is a little different. I realized when I first got into the business that I couldn't memorize lines the same way everyone else did, as far as, like, studying the page, highlighting the words, writing in your inner monologue and stuff. But, like, I love music, and I love sound, and I love rhythm, and these are things that my ear just picks up in people talking. So for me, if I have a scene coming up that's really wordy, I'll get with the partner and I'll go, hey, could we just record this and on my phone, just our voices? And so then when I listen to it by myself, I critique it and do those little inner monologue notes myself and go, no, that would be said a lot slower because you mean it to carry this message to the other person and stuff like that. So I learn my lines like I learned music.
Anybody else?
I find that writing them.
This happens every time.
I know.
I think that like memorization is really easy for me because I mean, well, no. In all seriousness, I think I genuinely do. I think if I mean, unless you have a method that works better for you, I think it's very much a muscle you can exercise. I know I've gotten so much better at it as we've gotten more and more scripts because, and there's also just like, hey, you're filming this tomorrow. So it's like you have to be fast. You have to be fast at memorizing. But I feel like also if you understand what your character is talking about, then it's fairly easy to remember what you need to say.
Yeah, I feel like memory is something that you can actually get really good at, and the more you do it, the more you practice it, the better you get at it. Like I think now at this point in my career, I memorized so many lines that I can look at a page and memorize most of it. It's just, I feel like it's honestly like it feels like a muscle that you do just keep working, and it depends on how much work a scene needs. So if you need to like actually, really break a scene down, then you kind of memorize it by doing the actual work of the lines. But yeah, there's a lot of days that we're just like, we're gonna do this scene instead today because this happened, and it's like, oh, okay, well, let's do this now,
Yeah.
So, and we've all been playing these characters now for such a decent amount of time that it's pretty natural for us all. So I wouldn't say it's.
There's actually a joke, like on our side of. It's a little bit disrespectful, but I'm going to say it anyway. No, what we talk about is like in season 1, the actors study their lines a full week in advance, and they have like broken down everything. And in season 2, they learn their lines the night before. In season 3, they're learning their lines in the hair and makeup chair the morning of. And by season 4, they're learning their lines in rehearsal by reading it off the page, and then it all just goes to shit from there. But but that's kind of the way it goes.
It's also our job. Like, it's just part of the job. Like, you're going to find a way to do it because you have to do it,
Like I think it's because there's this thing on Netflix. I think it's called The Brain and How It Works or something like that. And it was like talking about like memory, and if you connect it to a story, then that's when you can learn it easier. Like the people who do like memory challenges and stuff or whatever. Like I think the highest number somebody memorized was like 522 numbers, but then there's like millions of people that have played like Hamlet, and that's over 522 words. Obviously, it's like 30,000 words. So it's just if you connect it to a story and you know what you're talking about, like Aria said, then it's easier. But for me, when I learn lines, just because of that's just how I was taught when I was like working like with my coach, I would just do it like monotone. Like if my line was like, I have to go out to my car, like I would learn it, I have to go. So I don't add anything to it. So then when I get in the scene, then I'm able to play with it. Now I haven't already made up my mind on how I'm gonna do it, so I can be present with the other actor.
Well, and I feel like it's all like, it's not long-term memory whatsoever. Like we will do this scene, like I don't know what I said yesterday, like it's gone. And I like used to like judge people like when they did interviews, and it was like what did you say it? And like people would be like, I have no idea. But genuinely, like I tried to name off all the monsters that we've done this like entire show. I couldn't tell you.
Kaylee and I play this really fun game of like name the episode title.
Nope.
And I know all the titles from season 1, not as great in season 2, but we played this game over hiatus of like, and what was episode 4? And she was like,
Spider.
Spider time.
I can remember seeing sometimes me and Aria did that on set one day with I think Kim. And I was like, just name an episode and whatever. Me and Aria gonna do the scene right here. See how good we are.
I felt like you remember like mostly how you felt like during shooting it. Like you can all remember like, I was telling her the other day when we were shooting episode 10 season 1 last year, we were all outside in the cold in the van, and we had the giggles and couldn't get through anything. And that was your episode that you were directing that season. I remember just because I remember how I felt and like the fun of it, I can remember little lines like the montage in the car and stuff like that.
I remember in like season 8 of Vampire Diaries, like Paul Wesley would come to the blocking rehearsal and then go, "Oh, geez, this is an important one, huh? Like I should probably learn this one." Like, because I remember we did the one where Damon comes back, one of those, and he was like, "Oh, geez, yeah, this is like, okay, like this is," and then the thing about Paul is, but then he could go and you'd worry, but then like you'd be like, "This is all," and then he comes back and he crushes it. But Paul would constantly walk into that stage in like season 8 and go, "Where's the library?" It's like, Paul, you've worked on this stage for 8 years. Like the library's never moved. But like he's so good at the memory on the one thing, but he had no idea where any set on those stages were. I hope it was just a charming thing he would do. But like they would just be like,
he was telling the
ADs
truth.
would be taking him right and left. And I'm like, Paul, you've been here for 8 years.
That's real though, because you're so focused on a very particular thing you have to know. Like the last thing you're worried about is like, where's the great room? Which way am I? With this day? Okay, cool. I'll see you there.
I just noticed there's arrows like to tell us
Yeah, the
which way. I just saw that
But
like last
Kim
week.
put those up because of me, because every time.
Because of all of us, everybody does
Oh
it.
yeah, for sure. But like I would look at her and be like, Kim.
Just doing an about face. And like, okay, this way.
You worry about the important things. We'll get there.
Yeah. All right, I think these guys got to go, but thank all you guys for coming out.
Thank you guys.
I'd like to shout out my mom.